The following is a paid advertisement. The content shared does not reflect the beliefs or opinions of Three Eagles Communications, Headwaters Media, or Heart of the Rockies radio management or staff.
Hello, welcome to the Living in Salida podcast. I am your host, Monica McCarthy. I am a realtor that specializes in Salida and surrounding areas. And today is an episode with just me. I'm going to talk to you about the considerations before buying a property in Salida, Colorado. If you're listening to this, you probably know a little bit about this town, but Salida, Colorado is a rural mountain town in southern Colorado. And there's just some unique things about buying property here. So whether you're buying a house or land, listen up, because these are some considerations that you might not have thought of, particularly if you're coming from the city. And I am someone who did that. And so I can speak firsthand on what it means to be in the real estate industry in the city versus in this small rural mountain town, and then also a property owner here. So I was practicing real estate for many years in the Denver metro area before I decided to make my move to Salida in early 2017. And in that process, I learned quite a bit from both the homeowner's perspective and the realtor's perspective on how property is just different here. It's not better or worse. It's just a little bit different. So these are some considerations that I think are important to just have in mind before you buy property out here. But before I get into all of those specifics, I want to talk about a different property. I have a listing. Like I said, I'm a realtor, so I want to do a little plug for one of the properties that I'm currently selling. It's 24277 River Rock Lane, and it's in Buena Vista, Colorado. This is a beautiful piece of land in the River Meadow Estates community, which is just a few minutes outside of Buena Vista in a covenant-protected community that has river frontage. And so some of the lots in this community are not right on the river, but this one is. It is 0.94 acres, and it's really gorgeous. It's on 126 feet of Arkansas River frontage. So you have the river right at your backyard, and then you are surrounded by mountains. So you've got amazing views of the Collegiate Peaks and really 360-degree mountain views. So if you are somebody who's interested in this area and you want to be right on the river, this is an amazing property to consider. It's listed at $495, which is actually significantly less than other similar properties just on the same street. And this property is also just a short walk to the community boat launch. So from your house, you can have a really short drive with your boat or even carry your boat to the community boat launch and then just get on the river right from there, which is spectacular. So you come out to this area for the river. A lot of people want the outdoors and the river life. This property offers that to you. So if you got more questions about that or you want to see some pictures, please reach out to me. All of my information's in the show notes. And that is a wonderful spot to consider. Okay, more considerations for you. What to consider before buying a property in Salida, Colorado? Consideration number one, downtown Salida is not cheap. So when people are looking for properties in this area, they tend to find the walkability and bikeability of the downtown corridor incredibly desirable. That's one of the main draws to downtown Salida specifically. The corner of F Street and First Street is the heart of downtown. We have that historic district there. It's walkable. There are restaurants and shops, and it's just, there's the river right by there. There's parks. It's just kind of the place to be. The heart of the town is right there. So if you have a house that's located within walking distance or biking distance to the heart of downtown, it's more desirable and therefore more expensive. So a lot of people who are wanting to come here, they are drawn to that lifestyle and want that, and then see the price tag attached to it and maybe decide maybe that's not for them, or it's okay and they're willing to have a house that perhaps needs a little bit of work, or just pay that premium. But just to consider that the downtown area is more costly per square foot, But there are a lot of options outside of downtown Salida. There are neighborhoods just adjacent to the downtown area, and then there are just towns nearby. Like we've got Poncha Springs, that is a short 10-minute drive outside of Salida. We've got Nathrop and Howard that are usually about 15 minutes or so outside of Salida. And so there are close by areas where you can get more bang for your buck. The price per square foot tends to be lower. And so if you're considering coming here, that's a trade-off. I recently spoke to somebody who wants to have the bikeability of downtown, but then they also wanted space from their neighbor. And those are not always easy to find, because if you're in the downtown area, you're often close to your neighbor. So, what's bikeable to you would be a question. Can you ride your bike a few miles, or is it just a few feet? So there are some communities outside of the downtown Salida area that I don't want to get too specific here, but just know that, reach out to me. I'm happy. I have a few in my back pocket that I can refer you to and kind of show you on a map where they are. And then it gives you a really good idea of, do you want to bike 10 minutes to town? Is it uphill or downhill? and all of that. So that's just a consideration. Downtown, it's a little bit more pricey. Okay, another consideration of buying property in Salida is the neighborhood. So what I mean by that is a few things. We've got the location of it. I alluded to that before. Are you close to downtown? But another thing is, are you close to trails, and are you close to amenities? So there are a lot of trails in Chaffee County in the Salida area. That's a huge draw to living here. And it's one of the huge reasons I came here. We've got mountain biking trails and running trails, and you're close to Monarch Mountain. And so how close do you want to be to those things? I personally live closer to Poncha Springs than downtown Salida. I made that choice of the hard choice I was just talking about before. Do we live in downtown, or I chose to be a little bit further outside of town so I could have a little bit more house for my money. And I also am close to Monarch Mountain, and then a lot of the trails outside of town, kind of close to Monarch Mountain up that way. And there's also the Arkansas Hills trails out here and the Methodist Mountain Trail system. And so there's communities outside of there. So if being able to bike or run from your front door is important to you, then choosing a community that has easy access to those things is another consideration, as well as, what are the covenants and the HOA fees and, what's associated with living in that community. So just a consideration for that. Okay, another big one is if you're coming out to Salida, you probably want a mountain view. We are surrounded by 3 mountain ranges. There are many, many properties with multiple options for mountain views. So getting a mountain view in some form or fashion, if you live here, is likely. But what does that mean, and how much does it cost? So if you're talking about a little peep of a mountain from your kitchen window and you're, close to other buildings, that might be different than if you want those floor to ceiling windows with this breathtaking mountain view and a huge patio facing the mountains, completely unobstructed. That's going to be different. I was recently working with a client, and that was a huge factor for them. They actually drove by almost every house we looked at before I even showed it to them, because they didn't even want to see it if they didn't have the right mountain view. So if you're in that camp, there are communities I can point you towards that would be more likely to offer the mountain view. And if you want the floor to ceiling windows, that's perhaps at a bigger price point than just the small windows. So just some considerations. In addition to that, the position of the home really matters. I'm actually from Texas originally, and that was not a concept that I even realized until over 15 years ago when I moved to Colorado. There's a difference between north and south facing, and that has to do with the sun and snow melt, particularly in the wintertime. So if you have a house that you don't want to have snow unmelted from your house for a considerable amount of time sometimes, perhaps choose the south facing versus north facing, or just the positioning of the house to have those mountain views. And then also to have passive solar coming in. a lot of the homes in this area don't have air conditioning. And so you'll often open your windows at night to capture in that cold air in the summertime, and then close them in the morning. And if you have a well-insulated house that's positioned well, you can get away with that. And so the positioning of your house really helps with terms of the sunlight and the snow melt. And also we're in a valley, so there's wind. Is there a windbreak nearby? That helps quite a bit as well. So just some considerations if you are buying a house here. It's more than just what the pictures show online. Really walking it and seeing it on a map and deciding what direction is north, south, east, and west when you're there can really help you decide how you're going to actually enjoy that property. Okay. Another consideration is future development plans. So we're in a growing community. Salida is incredibly popular and growing, as well as Poncha Springs that I mentioned before. It's just a few minutes away from Salida. So there's a lot of growth and development in this area. And some of that is planned and some of that is projected and some of that is completely unknown. We can't tell what's going to happen in 5 years usually. But sometimes when you're buying property, you can have an idea of whether or not the open space nearby is going to be developed, or, are they going to add in whatever amenity or store nearby. So that's just something to consider if you're buying particularly in Poncha Springs, what's slated to come soon, and do you want to be near that? Having development near you is not necessarily a bad thing. It can often be really good and really helpful, especially if it's an amenity that you want. So just being aware of that and doing what you can and having your realtor do what they can to research that and give you a good idea of what could potentially be coming. Sometimes it can add value to your property, but you're also dealing with some construction noise maybe. I don't know. Just consider it. Okay, another consideration for buying property out here. Like I said, this is a rural mountain community. The internet is not all the same in different parts of Chaffee County. So a lot of people who move to this area are remote workers. They come with their business with them, or they, especially during COVID, that there's a lot of people that have come here and brought their work with them. And so they need good workable internet. So that's pretty standard now, but internet in parts of the Salida, Colorado area is not the same as perhaps the city. So if you are somebody who works from home and having really great internet is very important to your survival, then that's something to do some research on. You can absolutely find good internet. There are various options to boost what's already out there, but especially if you're outside the grid in town, and town is on fiber, and there are places like Cowork in Salida that has good internet, and a lot of remote workers can have a desk there, pay for a desk there, an office space there to have more reliable internet. But if you're trying to work from home out in the mountains, consider that. And do you have good cell phone service? And does that need to be compensated with a satellite or even Starlink? So consider that. Make sure that you're asking those questions before you before you buy the house, but even before looking, it's a good idea to keep that in mind. Okay, another consideration would be the utilities. So if you're a city dweller, you're on city water and sewer, and the idea of anything other than that probably sounds foreign and scary to you. I actually just recently spoke to somebody who they were really intimidated by the idea of having something other than city-maintained water and sewer. So much of this area that is outside of the grid, and you don't have to go too far to be outside of the grid, is on well and septic. And so I know when I first moved out here, that was very foreign to me, and I didn't quite know how to approach it. And I learned a lot. And I'm wanting to pass on that knowledge to you. So it's a little plug for working with a local realtor. If you're considering buying out here, don't bring your city friend to help you. Work with a local realtor, whether it's me or anybody else. It really matters understanding the specifics of this area, and utilities is a huge one. So you can make some really big mistakes or oversights by not understanding how wells work, how septic tanks work, how water rights work. And so those are some big things to consider. So a well, for example, I will say, as if you're getting a property with a well or a septic tank, you want to have an inspection on both of those. And there are ways to negotiate inspections for when you're buying a property with that to where you're not paying all out of pocket. So that's a plug to work with a realtor who knows what they're talking about to negotiate for you. But you definitely want to have inspections on both of those things. I also recommend a well water test. So you're testing the quality of the water because it's not on city. It's not regulated the same way. And so you just want to make sure what exactly is happening from it being brought from the ground to your faucet. And you want to put that in your body. And you need, various filtration systems, things like that. So getting those tests really matters. And also the augmentation of a well. So augmentation of a well means how you can use the water coming from your well. Not every well is the same. Just because you have a well doesn't mean you can use the water however you want. It's actually regulated. So if you're somebody who wants to have a big garden, some wells are inside use only. You can't have a garden, period. And so that's a huge one. I actually worked with a client who they had to have a greenhouse. That was a huge one. So there were houses that were perfect in every way, but they didn't allow outdoor watering. And sometimes you can come up with solutions to that with the same house, and sometimes you can't. And do you want to go through the process of getting an augmentation? There's fees attached to that. So it's just a whole concept that just to consider. And then also, like I said, in a rural area, there are some properties that have ditch water rights that come with them, which is a value add. And so just understanding what that means. I'm not even going to get into water rights here. That's a boring, long 10 hours of information. But just know that's a thing and work with somebody who can help you in that process. Okay. Moving on from utilities. Okay. Short-term rentals. That's something that's been going on for over a decade or so, but this area has seen a lot of them, and in recent years has created multiple regulations and rules around short-term rentals. So a huge consideration if you're planning on moving here, particularly if you're planning on using short-term rental income to pay for living out here, you definitely want to consider what's happening right now. And listen up to this one, because I'm not going to get into specifics on what they are right now, because it's a topic that can change. But right now, there are regulations on a city level and a county level, and they're not the same. And depending on where the property is located matters how those are enforced. So you want to look at the HOA level. So your community itself, does it allow short-term rentals? And then on the city level, if you're inside Salida city limits, you're under regulations there. And then within that, the zoning of the city. So are you zone commercial? Are you zone residential? Things like that. And then on a county level, there are regulations on a county level. So if you've got a house outside of city limits, you're still under county regulations. So you just want to make sure that you understand what those are, because it's not a slam dunk to get short-term rentals. There are fees and regulations attached to that. So look for the latest on what's going on, and definitely do your research particularly before buying the property. But if that's a big piece of why you're buying a property out here, look into that. And then another consideration is covenants and restrictions of the neighborhood. So I mentioned this a little bit, but I want to dive into it more. Obviously, short-term rentals would be one. But one thing, if you're buying land particularly, you want to understand what you can build there. So every community it's a little bit different. Some are pretty lax, and some just have some general covenants, and then some are pretty strict. And so not only are there covenants, which means, the rules and regulations of the community, but then there are HOA fees, and there's a governing body there, and there are design restrictions to that community. So, for example, there's a community in town that wouldn't allow a detached garage. And I had a client looking at land, and that was something that they really wanted. And so they chose to not build in that or buy in that community and build in that community. So if there's something that matters to you and what you're planning to buy or add to the existing home, you want to make sure that you're looking at the covenants of that community and they align with your plans there. There are some communities that have a minimum square footage requirement for a home. So keep that in mind. Some are strict about the fence. I mean, not all of them are strict, but just there's some things to keep in mind. And it's really important. I would recommend before even looking at the house, a lot of times your realtor can get you access to those covenants so you can get a good feel. Do I even want to consider this neighborhood? I've had clients completely opt out of a specific neighborhood because it didn't matter if the house was perfect. They didn't want to be in that neighborhood because of various restrictions. So I think it just saves a lot of time if you are aware of those ahead of time, particularly if you have a really good vision for what you want. And then my last consideration for today's podcast would be challenges of building on vacant land. So it's not uncommon to look in this area. We don't have a ton of houses right now. We've got decent inventory, but it's a small community, so there's not a ton of houses. And so it's not uncommon for somebody to look and not find what they want. And they just have this vision of, this is the house that I want to build. So I'm just going to buy land and build it. Great. Keep in mind that in addition to the covenants and all of the restrictions and everything I was just talking about, that builders, many of them, most of them are many years out right now. So if that's something you're okay with, if you're okay with perhaps buying a smaller home in the interim and letting that appreciate and then build, or renting, or not even coming out here yet, depending on what your plans are, just keep that in mind, because you're most likely not going to be able to break ground on your home when you close on the land. That's just a reality. So keep that in mind, that getting a builder out here could take several years. Sometimes people can find somebody that's new, or they bring their own. There's sometimes you can find some scenarios that aren't many years out, but it's often the case. Another way to think of it is, maybe you don't want to take the time to buy land and build a house, but maybe you could see a house that is on, not doing so well on a really great location, and then you could scrape it, or you could remodel that, or you could add an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. So I've had clients, particularly in the downtown area, it's becoming more popular to buy homes and build an ADU on it to either rent or live in while they do work on the main home. So there are some workarounds if you don't want to start from scratch with a new home. So you can get really creative. So again, talk to a local realtor who can help you navigate all of those things and more. I'm just giving you a brief overview of some of the big things that I've seen over the years being out here, especially coming from a city dweller's perspective. You might not even think about until you come out here. And I don't want you to be surprised. So work with somebody who can help navigate that for you. Be your advocate and making sure your best interests are at heart there, and you're not blindsided, especially after you buy the house. That's the last time you want to be blindsided. So that really matters. And if you would like to chat with me about perhaps helping you with that, please reach out to me. I'm happy to set up a call with you. All of my information is in the contact and the show notes below. And if you found this helpful, I would appreciate it if you shared it with a friend or subscribed to the channel and even left me a review if you're on a platform where you can do that. And again, my name is Monica McCarthy. I'm a realtor that specializes in Salida, Colorado and surrounding areas. And I appreciate your time listening to this. Take good care.